Adam, the rankings are more outdated or useless now preseason wise than they've ever been because of roster turnover and all of the different things that happened. That was one of FSU's problems last year, was a gigantic roster turnover that they didn't really rebuild from. And people kind of went back to the old thing of like, well, if a team is good in year A, then in year B, they'll be good again, which is not the case in pro sports because of free agency, and their free agency has rules. That's why I think that they need to get rid of them, because they're less relevant than they've ever been.
Yeah, no doubt. There's just a lot of factors that go into projecting teams now, and the rosters are always changing, and new quarterbacks, and it's just really hard to size up who's going to be good. Going into a season without seeing things. And people will say, well, could you have a poll after 3 weeks, 4 weeks? It might have to be till mid-season, because you have some really soft opening schedules, and other teams like Baylor, who's obviously challenging themselves, we think, tremendously going into the year. So I think it does take a little bit of time before you can assess whether a team is good or not.
And Adam, I guess that's kind of what the Big 12 thought. I guess just at least is trying to eliminate some of that perception, getting rid of that preseason poll, and seeing, how it took a while for people to sort of latch on to Arizona State last year. Whereas if they had started off a little bit closer, then maybe you're in that top 25 a little bit earlier, and it sounds and looks different. But do you think that's kind of where the Big 12 was coming from as well in terms, or was that just like, hey, our media is embarrassing how bad they are at picking teams, we got to get rid of this thing?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, I don't think they care as much about the media being wrong, but yeah, it does impact. It colors the view of certain teams. And, you bring up, the Big 12, and, a lot of my thought on this came from being at Big 12 Media Day and talking to guys like Matt Campbell and Chris Kleiman, who will be playing in Ireland in week 0. And both of them are concerned about what happens to the loser, as far as perception and rankings. Iowa State, I would imagine, will be Kansas State's probably a fringe top 25 team, but they're both concerned about what happens to that loser. Do they fall out? And if they fall out, how hard will it be for them to get back in? I mean, that might be two really, really good teams, as you guys know, that play right away. And how damaging will that loss? We know they can't both win. One of them's going to lose. And is one of them going to fall out of the top 25? And how hard will it be for that team to regain some level of perception? Kansas State, for example, Iowa State has Iowa coming up, but Kansas State, I don't have their schedule in front of me. If they lose that game, how long will it take for them to be viewed as a good team again?
Yeah, there's no question about that. And it does seem like some conferences, if you do lose early, it does take longer to get back, maybe back in the race a little bit. Do you believe at all that there is an SEC-type bubble when it comes to the polls preseason or not?
Yeah, I think there's been an SEC bubble. I think there's been a Notre Dame bubble at times, and we've seen them struggle, even under Marcus Freeman, especially under Marcus Freeman, honestly, in early season games. They obviously turned out to be a really good team last year, but they've had their issues early on. Again, not to pick on one school, but since it's near you guys, I guess I will. How many times has Texas A&M been seen as a really good win or early in the year, or a really good loss? And then at the end of the year, they're sitting there at 7-5. They're an average football team. And there's a bunch of teams out there like that. So, that's a team that I think has been overvalued at times. I mean, you guys remember that opener? Was it A&M and South Carolina a number of years?
Oh, yeah. Kenny Trill.
They were two bad teams, two average teams. Like, we just don't know. And not to pick on those teams, because they're just, two of many that we could pick and choose from over the years that didn't turn out to be as good as the preseason polls thought they would, because it's really, really hard to project how good these teams actually will be.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com, with us today on 365 Sports.
Adam, do you think the coaches are worried because it does bury itself in the psyche a little bit, and you don't even know you're talking about it? One of the things I've heard on college football playoff discussions, let's just say Notre Dame was 7th in the country when they beat them. And you're like, well, but Notre Dame just lost 3 straight games. They never really were 7th in the country.
Yeah, it's not real.
Yeah.
You know, we beat 4 top 10 teams. Well, how many of them are top 10 teams now? And I think this is something that I know Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, is very interested in, as someone who's still pro selection committee, of having teams be viewed much more in real time versus what they were at the time of X or Y. I think that's going to be, if we're going to continue with this system, especially if we go to a playoff model where the selection committee's picking even more teams to be included, how sophisticated will their view of those teams be? I think that's something that certainly if you're Brett Yormark or Jim Phillips, or if you're any of the commissioners of those other conferences outside of the Big Ten and SEC, you want to have as clear a view of your team and of those other contending teams as possible when those selections are made.
Adam, not to make too much out of media days, but Big Ten wrapping things up last week. We heard from Tony Petitti for what feels like kind of one of the only times, one of the first times in quite a while, and everybody else is now wrapped up theirs for the most part. Any impressions or thoughts in particular coming out of the Big Ten last week, and just kind of the whole media carousel that's been ongoing now for the past month?
Right. Well, yeah, I've covered the Big Ten for a long time, as you guys know, and I can't remember too many times where the league has been as united behind a plan as the coaches and administrators. Obviously, Tony leading the way. They are very much behind his playoff model, which doesn't seem to be overly popular around the rest of the country. But the Big Ten, very much in lockstep and seeing the value of that system. Now, will they end up compromising? I guess we'll find out. Tony, I thought, when I asked him about this, even in my one-on-one with him, was very careful not to say, hey, the SEC must do this. We need to all play the same amount of conference games. One of the reasons he was pushing this model was that he doesn't believe that if it was in place, rather, he doesn't think it matters how many conference games you play, because everybody in those 2 leagues will be playing for the top 4 spots. So if you want to play 8 conference games or 9 conference games or 6 conference games, do whatever you want. But at least this will be clear and take the selections out of the committee's hands for the most part in the Big Ten and SEC. So again, I think where it goes, I think staying at 12 teams is very much a possibility, unless the SEC is willing to budge one way or the other.
Wasn't it a little bit, I guess I kind of liked it that the SEC and the Big Ten disagree on something, because it seemed like they were just going to gobble up America and move on with it. So it's kind of nice to see a little bit of friction between them, isn't it?
Well, it's so funny, Smokey. And I mean, you've been around just like I have. These leagues used to really battle it out, and we're not on the same page, and we're truly rivals. Until Tony Petitti, I think, got the job and built this synergy with Greg Sankey. They started meeting as groups of administrators and presidents, and my interview with Tony was cut short a little bit because he got a call from Greg Sankey. So they're still very much in communication, even though they clearly don't agree right now on what the future playoff model should be. But it's just ironic, as you're right in saying that. But historically, they haven't agreed on that many things. There hasn't been this much collaboration between these 2 conferences, but a big part of it is in the post-expansion world. Everybody knows that the power in the sport is consolidated in the SEC and Big Ten.
Adam, what would be so terrible about those 2 leagues, including the ACC and Big 12, in those plans for scheduling, if it balanced this out and everybody could agree to say 8? Jim Phillips had the dumbest explanation as to why they stay at 8, because they have 17 teams, to which, as long as they have 10 teams in the league, they can play 9 games.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time following that. I think, my thing on scheduling, and I think we talked about it on this show before, guys, what's best for the fans? And what's best for the fans is more conference games and more notable non-conference games. What's best for the fans is a schedule like what Baylor has this year. That serves the fans of Baylor. It serves the fans of Auburn and SMU and all those teams that get to see meaningful games. we have a sport that is by most accounts second most popular sport in the country. It's a really short season, and there's a lot of wasted weekends. And it's a shame that continues to be the norm, and if it continues to be accepted, because it's not serving the fans as well as it could be. What drives me crazy, and I've kind of given up because I've been doing this over the years, are the SEC fans who support an 8-game conference schedule. Why support something that literally doesn't serve you, that's making you waste your money if you're an SEC season ticket holder to see games that largely aren't competitive? Like, is that why you're a sports fan? Is that why you're a fan of Team X in the SEC? I'll never, ever understand that. So, again, it was interesting that Tony did not push the uniformity in scheduling, but I'll tell you this, guys, the coaches in the Big Ten are very much in favor of that, maybe even more so than the model of having all of these guaranteed spots for Big Ten teams.
I had